Hi, Mike and I are very happy to be here to talk about the economics of incentivizing food safety today. Next slide, please. So from an economics perspective, food safety is essentially a problem of parties in the market not having perfect information about the safety of the product they're buying. Consumers can't directly observe the safety of the product or the effort that's put into making the product safe. And frankly, the same holds true for firms along the supply chain. And without that information, none of the actors in the market can use their purchasing behavior to signal how important safety is to them. And as a result, the market will underproduce the amount of safety that consumers and frankly others in the supply chain want. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk today about incentives, and Mike's going to give, I'm going to talk about the general kind of economic perspective on incentives, and Mike will then talk about what we know empirically about incentives within the meat industry and USDA's role in that. But first, I want to start with a little bit about the economic theory of this. So all markets create incentives, whether for good or for ill. Incentives about product quality, incentives about the truthfulness of information, incentives about fair pricing. And the issue is how strong and truthful, really, that information and the incentives are, and how the incentives can be strengthened. We thought it would be helpful to remind you and ourselves about how incentives operate in the market. Safety incentive systems combine incentive mechanisms that act between different parties in the market with a decision process and control system within the firm or by the consumer, that control mechanism to control the hazard. And this is all shaped by the legal environment in which people are acting. An incentive mechanism involves two elements: a performance measure and a performance reward to induce others to use a control measure. So for example, a firm may say they'll pay a premium for a product that meets a certain safety standard or quality standard or certification, or they may enter long-term contracts with other firms that are willing to meet safety control requirements specified in the contract. And the thing to notice here is that the reward for taking those safety measures may include things other than price, things like the stability of a long-term contract or other risk-reducing measures. And notice that all of this involves the exchange of information and the potential for fraudulent information to enter. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Sandy. That was very informative. I'm here to talk about the provision of information to consumers and some empirical evidence. Information is provided to consumers through brands that provide a minimum level of quality in return for a little bit higher price. Oftentimes, this brand attains or obtains its minimum level of quality through some sort of some form of certification, third-party certification, such as a USDA organic label. This provides certainty that to the consumer that the product is organic, and in return, consumers pay a bit higher price. That higher price, of course, goes to the brand, not to the USDA. USDA also provides some web-based information. For example, they post salmonella levels on their website. Now I'm going to provide some empirical evidence of how these bits of information have affected markets. Next slide, please. Okay, there was a problem with high salmonella levels in chicken carcasses around the year 2003 to 2005, and USDA came up with the idea of posting performance levels on their website. So at ERS, we track the performance of chicken carcass plants on salmonella tests. And the next slide will show the results. Here we show what happened. In 2005 to 2010, salmonella levels dropped by half. This was motivated by an announcement in 2006. The graph is a bit misleading because they're in increments of 1 year. But in 2006, USDA announced that it would start disclosing performance levels on their website of performance on salmonella tests conducted by USDA on chicken carcasses. And producers got the message, and they dropped salmonella levels by about half by 2010. Next slide, please. Another way to disclose information is through product recalls. This tells the consumer that there's something wrong with the product that can adversely affect their health, so they recall the product. Next slide will show what producers or how they respond. This graph shows that salmonella levels again dropped in meat grinding plants that produce ground beef. It dropped by about half again, from a high at the recall year to the industry average by the third year afterwards. These recalls were not for salmonella, but establishments learned that they had to improve their food safety overall. So they improved food safety, and that's reflected in lower salmonella levels. So now let's talk about pricing. Next slide, please. Organic certification has enabled the market for organic products because it gives certainty about the organic nature of the product. Andy Carlson of ERS and Ed Janicki looked at the prices of organic products relative to other products. And the next slide will show what the differences are. As you can see, there's a huge gap, actually, ranging from 7 to 82% price premium for organic products. And this is a result of consumers being aware or being certain that the product is organic and be willing to pay a higher price in accordance with that. So we can summarize this in the next slide. So disclosure of food safety information on the website motivated improved performance. Recalls also motivated improved food safety performance, and that's through media disclosure. And organic prices yield price premiums. So let's go to the next slide. So we have these three ways of communicating to consumers and to the industry and to retailers. There's this web-based system. The problem with web-based systems, as pointed out by ERS and experienced by FSIS, is that it doesn't reach everybody. And so all producers don't get the message, and they all may not respond accordingly. There's also media-based information. This is episodic, though. It only happens at recalls and bad events, and it happens to very few firms and very few establishments. Well, there's label-based information, and we saw with the price premiums for organic products that it's quite effective. And USDA currently has a role in that in organic certification. It also provides a meat grade, but there's no food safety information. We have the next slide, please. So Sandy and my idea is to provide better information to consumers. One way to provide better information is through a web-based system. And the information that should be provided is quality level of the last product. So this would be the final processing plant. A better way to provide information is directly on the label. The advantage of providing information on the last product is that it's the best information about food safety. And the advantage of providing information in general is that it's a market-based system that doesn't require new regulation. The advantage of putting it on a label is that it's accessible to all. And the business of certifications and rankings and so forth has been done by USDA throughout its history. There would likely be higher costs, though. There would have to be additional FSIS testing in final product processing. There would have to be some work with retailers and producers to get their agreement and convince them that it's an important step. And there's also the problem that consumers' attention to label information is limited. And there's also incentives to retailers to either provide better information or to not. Anyway, our biggest idea is, again, better information to consumers. The first option would be labels. Second option would be on the website. Thank you.
I would also wanted to say that in our slides, we have a few slides with additional reading, if you're interested, both ERS work and then also additional reading that we found that we thought might be helpful. Next slide, please.